Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Hope everybody's having a wonderful evening tonight. I am Brendan. This is Brandon, and we've got more Seahawks stuff to talk about today. We have got a preseason game number 2 coming up here. Number 2. And tonight we are going to break it down, talk about these Dallas Cowboys a little bit, talk about some things to watch for, talk about where we should be looking for the positives, maybe where to look for to see if we can find some negatives. We're going to go through it all tonight. How you doing tonight, Brandon? First, let me just say.
I'm doing great, man. I appreciate you having me on your side of things. I know we got going both ways, but we're technically in your house tonight. So thanks for having me here. I'll try not to muddy up the furniture too much.
Right. So in terms of Seahawks news, since we last met 48 hours ago, not a whole lot going on. Not a whole lot different. Pretty much the same stuff going on. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. Yeah, it's been a very it's been a good training camp period, but it's been one of the quieter ones in recent years as far as there's not being a story that's sort of jumping out at the forefront as we go through. That's an eye catcher, if you were.
Mhm. Yeah, the main things that we've learned over the last couple of days would be quite a few players actually came back from injury today. We had Trey Brown come back today. K9 was working with the team during the contact portion, so he's pretty much all the way back at this point. So that's good news. Sutherland got hurt yesterday, but was practicing today. So whatever it was, obviously couldn't have been very much. So we are definitely getting a few people back. So that's definitely a good thing. And other than that, things are just kind of going the way they've been. Anything that you want to throw in about as we head into preseason game number 2?
No, I think you want to get it's a little bit of just everybody's just trying to stay alive a little bit as you get through training camp. Let's get to the real games with everybody in our roster fully as envisioned when we were in the offseason heading in, where you're not, oh, this guy went down for the season, kind of like what's happened to the Broncos a little bit at certain points this preseason, unfortunately. So you're at the head of that where most of these injuries are soft tissue, where people are going to come back from them relatively quickly. If they're not back now, they will be back. The team's obviously going to be careful where they can with certain guys. So you're going to get everybody back, it sounds like, for the most part. And there seems to be more of a building, feeling here that Adams is close to getting back, I guess. That's been, I don't know, much a change, but that's not as much something I've heard of, Brendan. I'd love to know if you feel the same. There's just a general feeling that's kind of been building where there was a question mark for me in my mind a couple of weeks ago, but the way that they're talking about, the way the coaches are talking about, the way Jordan Brooks talks about it, I feel like he does seem like he's en route somewhat soon.
Yeah, the implication seems to be that Brooks and Adams were right close to each other in their rehab. So now that Brooks is here, Adams can only be a little bit behind.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with that. I would expect that to play out that way as well. Still waiting for word on a guy like a Mike Morris. He's still out. He's missed a couple practices in a row now. Vi Jones has now missed a handful of practices. He may be out a little bit longer still. Obviously, Witherspoon looks like we're going to get him back sometime next week, which again means he's missing most, if not all, of the preseason. Which I I think he's talented enough to make contributions this year, but it may not be immediate.
Can you remember the last rookie who missed really the greater part of training camp, who then went on into that rookie year with the Seahawks and had some kind of impact?
Well, no, actually, earlier today I was thinking about the opposite thing because I remember Rashad Penny missed training camp and preseason, and he did not do anything until like week 12, week 13. Now, that's Rashad Penny. That's not a prospect of the caliber of Witherspoon, but he's also a running back. You got to figure running back should be a little more plug and play than cornerback. So,
Well, to your point on this, though, too, LJ Collier came in his first year. If it was a broken hand, he got something happened initially in training camp, knocked him out through training camp. He never obviously developed further beyond that. But I think there's more of a collection of stories we can find of recent examples of when players run into that, they have a hard time contributing. It doesn't mean that they're wholly removed from contributing, but it definitely sets them back behind the 8 ball as far as our hopes for what they can be and where they are going to align in at.
mm-hmm. Okay, so I think that's about it in terms of like midweek team news, right? We had a little bit of roster churn this morning, brought back Matthew Gotel, nose tackle, who I think was here last year for a little bit. So welcome back.
Welcome back, Mr. Goat.
Yeah, and we let Robert Cooper go again. It seems like he just can't get into shape. That seems to me to be what's going on.
There was one shot I was digging through for building a thumbnail, Brendan, and I got with one shot where Cooper's chasing down in the back end of things, and his jersey's flopped over the belly, and it looks like double the Brandon Mabane jelly roll belly on him. Remember Brent Mabane with the
Oh yeah,
little,
I
and
remember
so
that.
add twice, and that's him just running in the open field as his belly's flapping, and is like, well, I'm not using that for a thumbnail. I'm trying to make people throw up.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's not a pretty image. Although sometimes that's what you want from your nose tackle. Maybe we're moving away from that. We're moving away from the 400-pound nose tackles.
I think you just kind of took it logically into the direction where it's heading now, and that this is now going to maybe start to move away from these guys being at that 350 range because they need to move. They need to be able to get out and impact the outside part of the game. They can't just be expected to handle their A gap anymore and be like, that's good. You've done your job. You did your little bit, your little tiny part that we want you responsible for, because you don't expect them to do pass rush in addition to it. So those days seem to be kind of maybe going out the door there.
Okay, so I think we're gonna swing into talk about this preseason game real quick. We got an early dono. Empower code. Thank you for the $5. Let's go, Killer Bees. Thanks for doing what you do. I really appreciate your coverage. Never change. Thank you, Empower.
Thank you, Powder. Never will, man. We'll keep it rolling. So thank you, brother. It's good to see you in the chat too, man.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Dallas Cowboys. The game is in Seattle. We had bad information on Tuesday. We said it was in Dallas. It is not. This is our second and final preseason home game. So, Dallas, the Dallas side of things, we already kind of know what's up. They've already said they're not really going to be playing their veterans this preseason. So, not going to be any Dak Prescott, no Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb, Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs. Probably not going to see any of those guys. Seattle's side, Carroll likes to keep it vague. He likes to not really say anything too committal. But if I had to guess, I would say not going to be seeing Geno, not going to be seeing Lockett or Metcalf or K9, even though he is physically back now. Cross, Lucas, maybe could go either way there. So it's probably going to be a lot of the reserve. So who are you keeping an eye on going into this second preseason game?
Well, I think there's a lot of guys to kind of draw eyes to, I think, in this particular one. Certainly the receiver is where you're going to be going to, and that's going to be easy because that's where the ball is going to probably go a lot. I don't know how much even run Jackson's probably going to get in this game. They might have saw enough off the last one. They're like, yeah, we're good. He'll be fine, maybe a little bit, but what will happen is that you're going to get probably a steady mix of these other guys. Maybe hopefully we get a little bit of Cody Thompson. I'd like to know where he fits in the mix of this competition because he seems to be a guy that the coaching staff is really high on, but who we really have not really gotten a flavor for what he brings to the football field in any sort of preseason activity or game time goes. I think as much as anything, probably there's a little bit of offensive line, but are we going to see Oluwatimi with some of the injuries he's battled through here? I'm not sure there. How much are we really going to see down there on that line? Can, Bradford step forward, Brendan? He struggled. That PFF score was brutal. It sounded like from Carroll's press conference when he was talking about Bradford, they liked what they saw out of him a lot. So they were certainly a lot higher on him than what the coaching staff viewed, at least as far as what Carroll said. And he didn't have to say that necessarily. So a little bit of Bradford, but really it's the defensive side of the ball that you go to, where it's how are the edge guys going? More Tyreek Smith, more Boye Mafe. Those guys really showed up, and I was really liking what I was seeing. Can a guy like Jacob Bell, really just overtake this job in a way of you're on the fringe. There's no chance you're getting this job. There's no way you can make this roster. We've got it already set. I mean, you're going to have to, and again, and again. And if he can stack those kind of performances, make it that decision really hard for this coaching staff. I think that will be interesting to really check out. Hopefully more Devin Bush. I really liked what I saw from him, Brendan, and going back and reevaluating the footage, especially the all 22 shots where you really get a feel for, some of what he was doing a bit. He was all over the field. Secondaries, obviously, Kobe Bryant at safety. Like, is that going to be something that's really something we can work through and is going to make sense back there? Trey Brown coming back. Trey's got to get better in the tackling game. And I think you had two of the kind of parts that are an issue you have with his game as you look on the outside in on with him, even if he's come back with his athletic ability and his speed, Brendan. And that is he's a smaller guy. So when you line him on the outside, there's just some balls he can't get to if the quarterback throws it right up to a particular receiver that's tall enough, long enough, and can jump high enough to outstretch him. And then the tackling. There was a couple instances of missed tackling out there, and you do wonder for a guy his size if that's a part of his game that can hold up. It wasn't bad when he first came here a couple of years ago, but it certainly stood out a little bit from last week. Early on, they shored some of that stuff up. So last guy, Jarek Reed. This guy to me is a very interesting cat, Brendan. We at some point have to talk a little bit about this when it comes to off-season pride content with roster building, and that you have a roster you build that's Super Bowl worthy, Super Bowl that can contend in that way. And it does need the stars and it does need the role players. But you also, I'd be interested to see if you agree, you need to also have these guys in the back end that are your 5th, 6th, 7th rounders that are on their rookie deal who are able to come in and contribute, be a spot starter, be it special teams, but then not be impactful in that role, but be more than just a guy back there, be something that you can actually lean on if he steps on the field. Do you feel similar?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big deal. That's a very big deal. Those guys, you get them practically for free for 3 seasons, right? Like that's what we have with Tariq Woolen now. We're getting a Pro Bowl caliber cornerback for the next 2 years on top of the 1 year we already had of a guy who's playing at an approximate Pro Bowl level. That's something that can completely remove the ceiling off of a team when you start getting into situations like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think he can be one of those guys, Brendan, watching him play and just knowing a little bit about the background with him at the Lobos and how he tested, and then how you could see that a little bit on the little bit of tape we could catch from him from the Lobos. We weren't able to get a lot, but the little bit I was able to see from him, you could see that speed and quickness and athletic ability was out there. And the fact that he was throwing his body around on top of it last week, where there was a sense of this, kid doesn't have he's not the biggest guy, but he will get in there and dig it out. Gives me a little bit of encouragement for him on into the future. Really would be nice with how much we're paying in the safety position to have a guy at the free safety backing it up on a, as you say, basically for free deal in his first 3 years.
Yeah, it's like getting those second round picks in baseball. If you can get basketball, you hit on a second round pick and they're basically playing for free. And it's so rare to hit on those second round picks in basketball. It's not like football at all, where you have hundreds of really good players in every class. Basketball, it's like 6. So if you can find one of those guys, it's just completely changes the your ceiling as a team, I think. So yeah, that's a big deal too. But the Kobe Bryant thing that you mentioned, I do think that is definitely one of the most interesting things to keep an eye on, because it just seems like there's a little bit of a low ceiling on him as a cornerback. I was watching some of the stuff from camp where JSN's just cooking him. He was one of the guys who got cooked pretty much every time in one-on-ones against receivers. Pretty much everybody else would at least make one standout play, like Witherspoon, Trey Brown, Jackson, et cetera, but it just seems like there's something he just can't quite keep up. So if you put him in that role where he's allowed to play as safety, I actually really like it. I know that we already talked about how you were a little concerned about jerking a guy around, and you definitely don't want to do that. But I have to say that I think this is for the better.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it in the respect of I don't know as much as what, like you mentioned, I think a good point, which is that the practice here factors in. You and I have only really the snaps that we can go off of with Bryant last year in the preseason on the outside. And even then the Steeler receiver was giving him a pretty hard time at that point, which doesn't help his case, even though that's small, little tiny sample size. But the coaches do have that practice, and they do have that to fall back in on and lean to as far as their determination on can he play on the outside or not. I was hopeful that he could slide into the slot last year. My real opinion on this, though, if you want to twist my arm on this one, is that I think he's probably best on his outside with some potential to be a safety, that he can maybe move to that place. I think slot at 6'1" in his size, and the fact that he's not necessarily he's good. He's got good bounce and good springiness in there, but he's not necessarily like he's not like Witherspoon. I mean, Witherspoon's kind of on the other end of the scale in that twitchiness end of things. And so when you put Brian down there, you show him all these one-on-ones going up against Jackson one-on-one where he's 2 steps away from him, and he's got to, as opposed to being able to lean into his cover 3 responsibilities and zone techniques that can allow him to kind of cover some of that stuff up. I do wonder about some of that stuff, Brendan, as far as maybe he could play out there, and that the coaches are actually being driven in this decision to do it because of, well, corner stacked up right now. Got a log jam. Safety, Is Jamal going to be coming back? Is he going to be healthy? Then we only got Love back there. Well, let's get it. Let's move. Which is it? Because if it's being driven by the fact this is his best position, 3 positions in 3 years or not, I'm in favor of it. If it's being driven by the fact that they have what they would consider a depth inadequacy at the safety position, then that has really nothing to do with what's best for Kobe Bryant or where he would play at his best. And that's where I wonder. I don't say I have a certain answer on it. That's the part I do wonder about this move.
Right. So looking at the defensive side of the ball, the most interesting guy we're going to go up against on Saturday, probably Deuce Vaughn, right? Because we know we're going to get a little bit of Cooper Rush and some Will Grier, not a ton of compelling stuff there. We're going to get some reserve receivers that are not really high-level NFL guys, like Jalen Tolbert probably is going to get out there a little bit. We'll see him. We're going to see that one kick. Oh, Turpin probably line up at receiver a little bit, but it's not going to be any of their heavy hitters at receiver. Offensive line is probably going to be a lot of backups that aren't going to play unless people get hurt. But Deuce Vaughn is a guy who seems to have kind of asserted himself as being a part of this Dallas offense this season, like when the games actually count.
Yeah.
So could be a little something to test against this run defense, even though I know we won't have very many starters out there either. But I think Deuce Vaughn's probably the second most interesting Cowboy that will actually play in this game. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, considering we're not sure on who else might be playing, that's probably about as good as any other on here. A little bit of the defensive line, because if it's like Haskins playing, or one of these, we've talked about one of these guys with the Cowboys being so stacked up on the defensive line, one who may be either A, available at the cut down day, or B, that they just straight cut them, and who might still be able to play, and we can maybe lock in on a little bit of that as well. I think in addition for our Hawks.
Yeah, I could definitely be open to that. Like, to me, by the way, the reason why I said second is that I think that Mozzie Smith is probably the most interesting Cowboy that will play, because he's a rookie. He's going to play. And I got to tell you, I'm really disappointed that Oluwatimi seems like he's not going to be ready to go. This would have been a great opportunity for him to play against an NFL caliber defensive lineman and show, hey, I should be starting, or you at least have to give me the opportunity to start if you decide you can't have Phil Haynes out there. This can still work, but he did not participate in the team drills today, so I have to believe he won't be available on Saturday.
Yeah, I would guess not. And I agree with you. It would have been a nice test to be able to see how he's going and how he can move along. It'll be a good test for the offensive line in general, who wasn't really able to create many holes last week. That was the part that they really struggled with across the board, starters or the depth through. And I'll tell you, the Cowboys, I don't know if you thought this way, but I thought the Cowboys approach, I'd call it not bad or good, just it's an interesting approach what they're taking. And taking Smith as they did in the first round, a guy you and I both saw is really a great run stuffer, sure. But what does this great run stuffer do for a defense that was already kind of solid on the defensive line? And maybe they're smart, and maybe it's going to help to take that defense off. And this will probably be more of a discussion you and I will have when they play them later on in the season. But that is going to be, I think, one of the nice things about the testing in the run game this week, if we start to see that get a little bit better, is you have a tougher test, even with the backups and third stringers here from the Cowboys, to be able to kind of get a better measure on some of these guys. I still am expecting Stone Forsythe to move nobody and to pass protect reasonably well. I mean, it'll be not beautiful or perfect, but it's okay. But get a little bit more push up front would be nice, I think, on the offensive side of the ball against that line.
Yeah, I mean, Forsythe, the problem even in pass protection, he is so slow out of his stance. He is very slow. The guy gets around him before he even stands up. So even on that front, it's tough.
I just say he's just really reliant on his length, Brendan. That's how I put it. He's not slow. He's just really reliant on his length.
Yeah, okay, that's the optimistic way to put it. But
you're not wrong. You're not wrong. And he is, he's a 6th rounder. We liked him a lot as pick, but at the end of the day, he's a 6th rounder that usually settle into what they are. I think the thing you're hoping to do, like we talked about with the Jarek Reed thing, you've got to get a collection of these guys that are on these kind of things, so you can sign the big boys, so you can accommodate this, accommodate that when you need to build onto the roster in other ways to go for something specific. So you have a Forsythe, you have a Jay Curhan, you have a Jarek Reed, you have all of these guys later round / undrafted rookie free agents that are dirt cheap, And now you freed up the cap in other ways to go out there and make another point of impact to really help the team out. So that's where their value lies in. If we have to start Storm Forsythe for a back half of a season, I would register to guess that Schneider would probably be making some kind of trade out there. But if he's got to go out there and hold the line for a couple days, it's going to be avert your eyes. You're going to be peeking through the, okay, is he, but he could probably keep the boat somewhat afloat if you had to, but your assessment's 100% accurate and on point with him. You're not going to get a lot from him.
Yeah, and understand, this is not me knocking the team. Like, there aren't that many good left tackles out there. You're not going to be able to have enough left tackles for there to be 2 or 3 good left tackles on every team. Yeah. So it just kind of is what it is. If something happened to where Forsythe was forced into a starting role, maybe we even make the annual call to the recently retired crew like Whitworth and Jason Peters.
Exactly.
Those guys get calls every single year, right?
Yeah. Isn't Dwayne Brown now retired or something? Isn't he out there?
I think so. Yeah. He could be another guy who starts getting calls.
George Fant, I think, is out there still somewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a couple guys out there I think you could still go and I don't think the team would ride or die with Ford. They're like, Cross goes down week 6 and they're like, well, Forsythe, you're going to be our Kurt Warner to the the Rams story, right? Right. No, it's not going to happen, but he's functional enough. You'd have to protect him and it's going to be hold on for dear life, but for what he costs and how he helps to kind of balance off that roster in that way for the price and all that's kind of ideal in that respect.
Yeah, you set all your running plays on fire. Every play is a passing play.
No, you're not running left. Let's just say that. Running left that day, it's going to have to be heavy right, heavy right, heavy right.
Garth Knight, thank you for the $4.99 super chat. Killer Bees.
What's up, Garth?
Garth, thank you. Appreciate
Thanks,
that. Good to have you around, man.
Yeah, it is good to have you around. Thank you, brother.
All right. So the Mozzie Smith factor, I think, like I already said, I think he's the most interesting Dallas player that's actually going to play in this game. But that's a very nice test for the interior of our offensive line, because that is, I think, the area that there's definitely some consternation about. So I want to ask you, what did you see from Evan Brown last week against the Vikings, and how do you feel like that's going to translate to this game where he's playing? I would go so far as to call him a better player than anybody he played on the Vikings last week.
It seemed like coming from Detroit that his strength was a little more run-based better than it is pass protecting. But last week he did seem to be a little bit better in pass protection, and then a run game wasn't getting as much push to me from what I saw. He seems to be a pretty smart guy in how he plays. I don't see him out of control. He had a good, his foundation is solid. He gets set up really quickly out of his stance. He takes on, I think, especially with show up in pass protection, takes on that heavy 1-0 tech guy that's coming at him there, where he can take that on and hold up. And I would trust him at times in that situation. I think with how just big he is, he's one of those guys that's really wide in addition to being big. So it's hard to get around him sometimes just by just that nature of it when you're already in kind of a phone booth down there, operating to try to get by or slip by if you're a defensive tackle. So he didn't stand out to me in that there was something super flashy about what he did. He did his job. It was fine. There wasn't a lot of push in the run game. That wasn't just him. It was everybody across the board kind of struggling in that respect of things this last week. But I also didn't see him getting beat either. I didn't see anybody twitching him up from the inside and giving him a move and pass protection. He's not going to be in over his head down there. And I think what's really nice, Brendan, with this on this is, Brent, would you not agree? Brown's floor is much higher, but it's higher than Blythe. Let's just try to put it in Israel. It's higher than Blythe, his floor.
It has to be. Blythe was probably the worst center last year that played significant snaps.
Yeah.
I don't know if he actually is, but he's right near the bottom. There's nowhere to go but up. When you're talking about whoever plays center this year, it would be really hard to be worse than Blythe was. Blythe started out kind of okay in the pass blocking area, but by the end of the season, I felt like he wasn't even doing that.
Agreed. And it was like a slow trickle down in his performance. So it was harder for people to know because he was he was sort of here in that averagey sort of place, and always bad through in the run, to your point. And then it just sort of kind of through the year, just kind of bit by bit. And by the end of the year, you're like, man, every time we're doing a run play, I'm watching him just getting blown off the ball back into the backfield. I mean, just every single one. And, that's where I don't think that's going to happen with Brown. And if he can at least supply that, we're just trying to hem up these weak links in the offensive line because we know we've got other places that can be I call it certifiable strengths, Brendan. 3/5 of this line are fine. You need these two spots to get themselves up to just get around a spitting distance of league average. And then this line can really, really cook.
Yeah, I think there are plenty of offensive lines out there in the NFL that have strength at 4 spots, and then the fifth spot is a weakness, and they just kind of mask it, and it doesn't ever really affect them. And I'm hoping that this year we can kind of do that with Haynes, where Haynes is the obvious weak spot, but it's something we can live with because the other 4 guys are good. And I think that has a real good chance of happening this year. I know that's betting a decent amount on Evan Brown, but I'll say it again. I think he's at least going to be decent at center, and that should be enough.
To your point on this, you are able to then supply Haynes. As much as I lament against this and rail against this with the flip-flop nature of how you should have Lewis and Haynes set up here, and I think you probably agree with me on it. The thing that is nice about this, though, is that in Haynes being a guy who is at that right guard spot, now he's going to be apt to get more help because of that natural trajectory of things going to the strong side. And so he's going to be getting Evan Brown with him on a lot of combo blocks a lot of the times, I think. And so that may make his performance look a little bit better. May not, we'll have to see with it. We're kind of making do right there at that position. And that's certainly something, they're going to be addressing some point in the future here, but just get it up a little bit from where we were last year on both those camps. And we'll be really, really good on the offensive line.
Yeah. Even though the offensive line was impressive all things considered, when you take in context into account, it was probably still one of the lesser offensive lines across the league. Like, a lot of teams out there will have a superstar. We didn't have anybody who was anywhere close to that level. Somebody who's just so dominant on the offensive line that they alone elevate everyone else's play. Like the Niners had Trent Williams. Green Bay some years has a guy like David Bakhtiari. These guys who were just superstars. We didn't have that. We were probably one of the lesser offensive lines out there. So there is plenty of room to go up, and there's no reason why they shouldn't go up.
Absolutely. You're going to definitely get your second year improvements from your tackles, and Lewis has settled in. He was the one guy who gave you a slightly above average performance last year on that line. And now you just need to take up those two positions that were well below league average, that were really like anchors on the whole unit, pulling them down. And that all goes together in the blender, and that should spit out a unit that can, to me, slide into being a top 10 unit overall. And if you take their metrics across the board, I would think that, especially being a unit that'll be very strong, I think, in pass protection, especially where you're going to give Geno the opportunity to really be able to survey the field and, cut things up.
Real quick here, Y2KHA, thank you for the $5 super chat. Love the team versatility. On defense, Witherspoon plus Love, interested to see how we fit them both on the field. I want to see them see 75% of snaps. That would be kind of hard, right? Because as of right now, Julian Love is your third safety, probably, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that would mean he's on the field when you're running 3-3-5, potentially, because you're going to, apparently anyway, we're running a lot of 3 safety looks this year.
Yes.
But we're not going to do it 75%, right?
No. Your slot. Well, I mean, you could. You ran nickel last year 72%, 71% of the time. Mm-hmm. So if you're in nickel, technically you could easily translate into, now is it 3-3-5? Maybe not. It's just 3-3-5, but something kind of still close to that same iteration. Just to me, that's more of the thing here is the nickel. Because the nickel then frees you up in the place of, you feel comfortable putting Julian in the slot if you have to. You feel comfortable keeping him back at strong safety if you have to, if you want to flop Jamal in there. I think if I was to make a guess here, and I'd love to hear if you think the same thing, Coach Carroll is, as much as getting Witherspoon on the field is going to be something I think the team's going to try to do and find ways to do, I think that's not going to come to me at the loss at this point of Love not being on the football field. He has been one of the best players in camp. He's been all over the place in camp. And you have just in however it is 3-3-5, the 2-man fronts dropping in, and whatever we want to go to as far as the formation it's going to be. When it comes down to it, to me, this is really gets simplified if we just toss that away for a second and go Love, Adams. How do I get those 2 guys on the field as much as humanly possible? And unfortunately, I come back to this a little bit with our point on this earlier with Witherspoon, Brendan. I want to see where you're at on this. in that this is where Witherspoon's behind that 8 ball, where you already have a coach who's probably leaning to, I got some vets here. I can chess piece them a little bit. Sometimes Adams is back in typical strong safety. Sometimes he's up in the box. Sometimes maybe I put him at linebacker. I mean, that's to me where you maybe see Witherspoon on is if you put Jamal down as one of the linebackers and then you put Love back as the strong safety and then you drop, Love in there. But I think he's going to lean to the other. Where do you stand on it?
Well, first of all, just in a general sense, I think that there's going to be a lot of mixing and matching of personnel throughout this season. I don't think there's going to be any one personnel group that we stay in like the whole season.
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be something that we just fall in love with and we're like, okay, we want these 11 guys out here in this arrangement 75 or 80% of the time. I think that you're going to see Adams play some linebacker and some safety. You're going to see Love play some slot corner and safety. You're going to see Kobe Bryant maybe play a little bit of safety, a little bit of cornerback. It's going to be, I think that with the way this team has been built right now, you got to do a lot of like mixing and matching and not showing any one look too much. So I do believe there's going to be a lot of variety there, but on the whole, I would say that I have to agree with you if there is going to be some kind of an overall preference there.
Does Love pull Adams snaps off the field, or does Adams pull Love snaps off the field?
If Jamal Adams is healthy, I gotta believe that. Let me lead off by saying I don't believe Adams will play every game this year. I think there are going to be plenty of games where he doesn't play for one reason or another. It might be like one of those 37-year-old NBA players, and you give them a lot of time off just because.
They got a load management.
Yeah, load management. Yeah, like Tim Duncan his final couple years, or Kawhi Leonard every year. Or actually
every game.
Yeah, actually now every player load manages except for like Mikal Bridges and stuff like that. But there's going to be plenty of snaps for Love to take in those games. So when Adams is healthy, I think Adams is going to seniority rules there. I think he's the guy who takes the snaps while he's healthy. And then when or if he gets hurt or maybe he's not performing, then we can do something else.
I just wonder if there's the draw there because how good a camp Love's had. He's been fantastic. If you had the top 3 or 4 players you're saying at camp, I think you'd have to include Love's name in there. And the versatility, the ability to play in coverage like he can, the ability to where you want to drop Jamal in at times into that cover 2, Brendan, or dare I say single high situations, you have no confidence as a coaching staff that you can do that. And I say that as a supporter of Jamal, not to say I like parts of his game, but I know after watching him here for a while going, that's probably not his wheelhouse. He can't really track the ball in the air. It's just the deeper he gets away, the farther he gets away from the line of scrimmage, it gets tougher for him. So that's why it really at the head of his eye, I wonder that a little bit, if that there's a little bit of maybe they all think they're in the same page on this one, coaching staff wise, but I wonder if there's a little bit of some inner debate about whether or not the best thing there is to actually have Love in these certain situations, especially if you're thinking it's going to be a pass play. And especially if a particular offense is going to try to maybe, if you think, look at their formation to attack you a little bit more on the deep side of things.
Yeah, I don't know. I get the sense that Pete, despite everything that has happened, loves Jamal Adams and wants to get him out there as much as he can. Agreed. And until he has to do something else, he will.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good bottom line way to put it. And we'll just have to see how it kind of goes through the year too, if it does evolve a bit.
Yeah, so if you take a look at our secondary, like Woolen's going to be out there basically 100%. Jackson's going to be out there basically 100% until Witherspoon's ramped up. Then I think Witherspoon kind of takes that. And I think Diggs is going to be out there basically 100%. He's basically, I think he played every snap last year, now that I think about it.
Yeah, just about, yeah.
Not seeing that changing. So there aren't that many slots that are open to where a player like Love could be on the field 75% of the time. That's tough.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. The only way it can happen, Y2K, I agree with Brendan that it's unlikely to happen. The only way it could happen if Coach Carroll and Clint Hurt tap into their inner creativity, do a little last trip and then come out of it and they're like, we're going to throw everything at them, and they decide to go very like defensive back heavy, like and really committing to a 3 safety look regardless of the fronts they want to use. That would be the only way it can happen, but that's hard to predict when you've never done that before. It'd be cool to see. It'd be awesome as an iteration of the defense and a change in Carroll's old defensive style a little bit, but it hasn't been done yet.
Yeah, if you have Adams out there because he's so good against the run and can even play pseudo linebacker, I feel like you could get away with that. Like that offsets some of what you're giving up in your front because you have Adams out there, right?
Yeah, especially if you're going to do a little bit like we did this last week, with there seemed to be a bit more of a prevalence of leaning into the heavy fronts, and if not just heavy fronts, dedicating more guys down around the line of scrimmage on run plays, as opposed to being they're dropping to depth or they're off. They're sort of their initial instinct post snap is to be going backwards rather than forwards. So if you're going to provide some more help as well, and that it's not Jamal out there having to hit a run fit with a dip around a guard coming down second level, and there's not another player to go, oh, you're going to bring the guard out. Well, now there's a clear gap for me to come as the slot and drive in there and go make the tackle if you do come down on Jamal in that situation. I also think some of this is, Brendan, too. You can do some of this from a predictive standpoint based upon the offensive formations from a given team you see week to week, because there's certain teams that are not like the Rams where they'll run everything out of one kind of formation. There's some of those teams that have distinct formations that they run, and they only run certain kind of things out of that. They'll only run out of this kind of formation, or they only really have a tendency to pass out of this formation. You can lean into those tendencies, put Jamal then in that will linebacker. I know it's two middle linebackers, but I like to refer to it as the weak because it's hard. Two middle linebackers in the reference is just tough to do. But then you could maybe predict it a little bit better to where you're now not having to worry about as much when you do put him down linebacker that they're going to come downhill and attack in the run game. And then he's really able to flourish down there because he can play games in the blitz. He can go find an easier point of coverage than what you get when he drops to depth with the flat routes and taking on tight ends, which I think he's really good in coverage in those situations. I think that's where Jamal really excels. And we didn't get to see a lot of it in that first year because he was blitzing so much and then playing so much cover too. But it does remain a part of Jamal's game that if he's healthy, this is why he was a top 10 pick in the draft. He wasn't just a top 10 pick in the draft because he's a good blitzer at LSU. He became a top 10 pick because he was a complete football player.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, his coverage metrics have always been really good until he got here. I mean, his LSU coverage metrics were sterling. In New York, they were sterling.
Yes, I believe he was the second or third rated defensive back by PFF standards in college football coming out of LSU in his final year, to your point. So, this narrative out there that exists from some Seahawks fans that Jamal can't cover. And I was trying to reference there at the front of it where this comes from. It's those horrible moments you have from that first year of Cooper Kupp beating him over the top, of Julian Edelman beating him up over the top, of Deshaun Jackson beating him up over the top. He's got like 3 or 4 of these plays on his resume here with Seattle that people just really remember. But it's just an understanding too that that's really not. He can do some of that stuff. Some of it was a little injured and beat up at that time, so he wasn't at fault. But also, you got to get him down near the line of scrimmage, and this is where the linebacker thing to me opens up here, Brendan. And this is where we get now to where how Julian Love maybe ends up playing a lot up to that amount of snaps is if you have him playing almost. Sometimes not the majority of strong safety snaps. What if he ends up taking 40, 45% of the strong safety snaps? Will he get another 30, 35% out of the slot? If he does that, if they're going to commit to running Jamal with those 45% snaps then up at the linebacker position, it could happen. That would be a way that could go. And maybe I'm being a little bit hopeful here, Brendan, and I'm like trying to talk to team because I would kind of like to see them playing with this different style and mixing it up in that way. On top of like what you said, they're going to mix up their coverages and change it all up a little bit across the board. Flip this thing over as a coin from what it was 3 years ago, where it was the most predictable defense you were going to find in the NFL, to now becoming, if not one of the most unpredictable, certainly up there in the upper echelon of one of the most unpredictable, if you were willing to do it.
Yeah, you look at this personnel, it should be done. You signed Julian Love, who was playing under Wink Martindale last year. Yeah. Talk about, the perfect place to go if you want to learn how to be unpredictable and creative and mixed with how you're utilized. So you sign a guy like that, you draft a pure man corner, you have another pure man corner on the team now it's Reek Woolen, I guess.
I'm not going to be able to. That one's going to take me all year to get that transition over.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you should be mixing it up a little bit for sure. And Y2KHA, thank you for the $2. He follows up on his first comment. 3-2-6 on passing downs could be interesting. Yeah, that's if Adams is out there as like your pseudo third linebacker, that's within the realm of possibility of working, I think.
I think it could work too. It's something we haven't seen, but NFL is always changing and there's always openings for new iterations of things to evolve into. And you and I and many others out there, not just you and I, people out there for a while now have been saying that getting to a more of a 3 safety look, pulling one less immobile linebacker off the field, pulling one less space eater lineman who doesn't do anything off the field in favor of this. It makes sense with where the passing attacks go, with where the lack of commitment to the running game is gone in the modern age. It adds up to this is where it would go. It's another thing to make it be shown out on the field, but man, you hit the last nail on the head with this, an exclamation point on this, where you couldn't be varied before because you didn't have the personnel to be varied. Why? For the reasons Brendan just talked about, being that you didn't have the guys that could run it in man base. If you're going to be pressure oriented, if you're going to be mixing things up, it's hard to be exotic if everything is to drop into a soft coverage. You're exotic when you're able to bring pressure, when you're able to bring pressure based looks. That's exotic. And it's not only that, it's also the zone stuff, but it's the mix. You couldn't mix it up before because you didn't have the guys that could be bringing it in the blitz and could hold up. And then you didn't have the guys in the back end that could hold up in man coverage. Those two things go together. And now, like Brendan just said, you actually have 3, 4 guys, 5 guys, from Julian Love to Witherspoon on down the line to Jamal Adams, to Jordan Brooks. I mean, Jordan Brooks, I knocked the hell out of his coverage, and he's not good in coverage. But you know what? It's in one specific area of coverage, zone. Mm-hmm. That's it. You put him in man, and he can actually hold up relatively well. You just say, hey, Jordan, cover that guy. Go back to his college tape. He can do that stuff. The problem is our defense hasn't asked him to do that stuff because we run zone out of our linebackers all the time. So you got it across the board now to run it if you want to.
Yeah.
Including Tariq.
Yeah. And I would love to see it. And if you want to send Brooks on blitzes too, I got to believe he's better as a blitzer than he will ever be as a zone cover guy. So if you can unleash him in that way, that might be good too. Just a thought.
Amen. I'd rather have that than the empty zone drop like Radigan last week, right? Radigan did that one drop early on in the game. They even showed the all-22 shot, and he's just dropping back. And the deer in the headlight look just, and the receiver's running right past his back. And then, it's 7 yards beyond him. And then he's like, oh, let me go get him. I'd much rather have that on the other end of it. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So, all right. So that's mostly we've spent time talking about this defense. Going over to the offense here. I watched that game last week, and I felt Locke played good. There was just the one really bad throw, and it was a really bad throw. I know it was tipped, but it was still a really bad throw. Felt like he played good, but coming out of that game, it seems like there's been a lot of criticism for the way he played in that game. PFF didn't care for him. I've got quite a few messages of people saying, Locke just doesn't look comfortable back there. Well, what did you take away from that game on Locke's front, and what do you want to see from him on Saturday night?
Locke's a tough evaluation, and I can understand the people that had a view of that game where they weren't as high on him. I don't share fully this sentiment, but I do find myself sympathetic to it to a certain degree. Because at the forefront of when I watch Locke play, I actually think he can make all the throws you need to have made. I think he's got plus mobility. I think he's got upside. Legit upside, not in this, if this guy try hard, he can be a game manager to where I think this guy can be as much a volume passer as you saw from Geno Smith. But the key on it becomes for me, just the biggest part here becomes his ability to, I hate the turnover worthy play thing. I don't think that's a real stat, but he's got to remove those turnover worthy plays, the obvious ones. We can talk about the less than obvious ones, but 3 of those last week, there's 3 throws there that are obvious ones to me. And that's why PFF dinged him, because PFF is going to ding quarterbacks more than anything else for turnover-worthy throws and turnover-worthy plays. And those plays were pretty much very clear there where he couldn't feel the pressure on the backside, just like last year in the game against the first preseason game. He couldn't feel, not only did he not see the blitzer coming on the backside, which it was his job, and he said this in the press conference, I'm not being hard on him, it was my job to pick it up. Carroll also said in this press conference after that game, it's his job to pick it up. He's got to pick that up in the deal. He not only didn't pick it up, but then he didn't feel the pressure coming from the backside at all either. And the same thing on that fumble that happened. And the overthrow to Jackson Smith where he whistles that ball up over the top. And it's just, what are you doing there? And there was, I think JT O'Sullivan and his quarterback cap did a little breakdown of them. There were some easier throws to be had on some of those throws that he made. The interception that he had, there was a Bobo post route up over the top on the backside. And it's so weird, Brendan, because he's going bump, and then coming back over here. but it's almost like he went bump, skip over, and then go to the third read rather than get to the post with Bobo that was open because he just skipped right over to it. It was almost like he's rushed. And so he's just got to play. I think that's probably where people get a little bit of he wasn't under control, wasn't seeing things clearly. We got to give him the full preseason, I think, to make an assessment about what he is. He hasn't played a lot of football the last couple of years. He definitely, had a game and a half last season. So having some rust, not being, fully acclimated to game, let's let it roll a little bit and see what he can do. But I want to see him playing a clean game. I want to come through this where you've played 3 quarters and I'm not going, it's one thing if it's on the line, Brendan, it's like, well, he's throwing up a fade route and the corner just outplayed the ball to the receiver. One of those kind of, right. It's a fade route. He's got to throw that ball. But it's another thing when you're putting it right down Main Street into the heart of where it's a corner sitting there staring, you're going, buddy, and that's where I can get the criticism. But I did think he played well overall. And there were some throws, Brendan, where he shows off that talent, that ability. The Bobo, the Bobo was one where here's where he shows you on the deep throw to Bobo, where Bobo had that sick release off the line of scrimmage. He's looking to his right initially. His read's to the right. But he sees Bobo just completely sauce up this guy to his left side, and it draws him immediate off his read, which is just what you want to see your quarterback do, right? If my guy smokes, even though this is the 4th read for you on the play, if he smokes him off the line, you got to feel that as a quarterback. And that's the part that gets you excited about. And that's the part where you go, well, there's actually is some upside here. But that other part, that upside is only going to go so far if you got that turnover bug that rears its ugly head 1, 2, 3 times a game if I have you start a football game.
Yeah, and like that wheel route to Kobach, I thought was great too. Seeing stuff like that where he doesn't throw it hard, but he throws it where it needs to be. Like that kind of stuff excites you. You listening to you talk through it, I can see some of the shortcomings. I still don't agree with PFF giving him like a 41, 42. I didn't buy that.
No, it was like a 65 grade. I would have given him maybe you go low 6, but it's a 65-ish in there for the day. There was some, and the wheel route you point to, that's a really good point because the wheel route had to be thrown in that in-between territory where he doesn't lollipop it and let the defender catch up and drag it down for a 10-yard gain. But he puts it on a bit of a line there to where he's really not only now being accurate with it because he's got to throw it harder and got to be more on it in his pinpoint, but also to give the running back the opportunity to take it 30 yards up the field. Put that ball right on that spot to do that. And that's not a lot of those quarterbacks there, Brendan, they'll do it safe. They'll do the lollipop. They get the completion. The guy gets drugged down, but they look good on their stat sheet with it. That's that See, you're talking. It's that aggressiveness he's got. He's got a little bit of that. Okay, there's a bit of a gunslinger in this approach to him, which now just like with Favre, you got the arm, buddy. You got this, but you got to eliminate this part of your game. This is what Holmgren's big thing was with Brett. You got to. I can see you're this wild pony. I got to get you tampered down on this. We got to eliminate part of your game, or you're not useful to us. And
and Holmgren was the only coach that was able to really rein him in. Every other coach he had, like he was still a good quarterback, but he'd still just kind of forget. He just kind of forget situations a little bit, forget risk reward evaluations, so it may not ever happen with Drew Lock.
It may not. And I'll say this, your point on that with Holmgren, he was the butt chewer. I'm going to stay on top you, Brett, every day. If I got to, you're going to listen to me, and not all coaches want to be programmed where they want to stay on a player like that. That's an old school kind of thing to be that way. And I don't know if Drew needs that. That was probably maybe, what the head coach there for the Broncos was probably a little bit more of that mindset and what he tried to bring to Drew. Yeah, Fangio was probably trying that on Drew, and maybe that just doesn't work as well as it used to. But it was always Favre fell right back into his bad habits the second that Holmgren left. In many respects, still was a pretty good player, but he just wasn't. You lose your usefulness as a quarterback when you're so turnover prone. It really harms your where you stand at in the league and where you are with your team because you're taking so much off by whatever you're adding on your level of play.
Let's see here. The Z. Thank you for the $5. I think he said in a previous super chat, just call me the Z. So I'm going to go with that. Thank you for the $5. Would you trade Fant in a 3rd or 4th for Buckner defensive tackle? Maybe call your show the Seahawks BR and End. Your names. I think I get that. I like 4-2-6 if we had great 4s too, and then a little bit down here, or 4-2-5 typo. So it's the defensive formation that Y2K was talking about a little bit up above, I think. Okay, so a couple things to dissect here. Fant and third or fourth for Buckner. You lead with this one. What do you think?
All day, every day, and twice on Sundays, Z. I mean, that's if the Colts are willing to flip it, then I'm willing to skin it. And so, that's that would be a very easy one for me. I think that is me and Brendan have talked this one over a couple of times, and looking back at Buckner, he did a restructure, which makes it pretty hard for the Colts to pull off any kind of deal there. There is the Fant money coming back in return on the other side of it, but I think you're still going to have to probably find some ways, unless the Colts are just going to eat money. And if the Colts are going to eat money on this deal, as far as dead money goes, then they're going to expect more than a third or a fourth for him. I mean, that takes it back up easy to a second, and maybe higher if it's a significant amount of money the Colts are being asked to have to swallow in this situation. What is it at, Brendan?
Well, they restructured Buckner so there would be a little dead money.
Okay.
Originally, the contract was in a state where they could trade him or cut him, and there's no dead money whatsoever. And then they did a small restructure, so it wouldn't be that bad. But I'm going to say this again. If they intended to move off of DeForest Buckner this offseason, why restructure him at all? So in order for them to trade Buckner now, there must have been it would have to be a situation where earlier this offseason they decided we're not going to trade Buckner this offseason, or we're not going to cut him. And then now they go, oh, we change our mind and we take this move that costs us money, but we don't care. We're going to change our minds. And that would be indicative of pretty bad planning on their part. So in order for that to happen, we would basically have needed the Colts to have messed up and be willing to eat their losses on the mistake. So it could happen, but you would need that.
I think you would need, for this domino to fall, I think, would you not agree, probably we would need the Jonathan Taylor move to happen ahead of it?
Oh, yeah. Jonathan Taylor. Yeah.
Because
then they've got nothing. Richardson
right.
looked terrible in that first preseason. They can't be thinking they're going to win any games with him this year.
Well, I mean, that's where you talk about the restructure. Let's step into this is going to be gross, Brendan. Let's step into the mind of what's that pilled up owner that they got over there?
Irsay.
Irsay. Let's step into Irsay's mind. So he's like, okay, I got an idea. We're going to restructure Buckner. Okay. We're going to restructure him. Coach, we're going to have Anthony Richardson, but he's going to be like Lamar. He's going to be Lamar in his first year. Okay. I'm talking MVP Lamar. He's rookies. He didn't play as much as Lamar. He didn't win a Heisman. Shut up. Just listen to me. We're going to do that. And then he gets to this now. And then he's like doing another line here before training camp. He's like, Taylor's not here. And he's just sitting out. He's sitting out, sir. It's basically got an ankle, maybe. He's just sitting out. And then they lost another guy to a season-ending injury. And so they're like, so he gets to the point where he goes, okay, we got to move off Taylor. So there's no way now. And we can see enough with, like you just said, our young quarterback that he's not ready. No surprise to anybody. Okay, let's get what we can get. And I think you're right that this would have been done before. I think it's not likely to happen now. It would not speak well to the Colts organization if they were to look to make this move at this point, because they could have probably gotten more if they had done it earlier this offseason. I think, though, why many Hawk fans bring this up, and I brought up before, is just it was a move that made a lot of sense for the Colts to make. It made sense at the time to trade for Buckner when you did. It made, just like it makes sense in this offseason coming into it, for you to move him as it would be right now, where there wasn't a lot of dead money hit. You could get maximum value return for him. By the time you're good again, he's going to be on the downside of his career and up for another contract, and you're not going to want to pay him. So get what you can get. But they didn't make that determination. They decided, no, we're going to go for it. And I think that Brendan had been a little bit talking themselves into that division being one of the more lesser divisions in football. And so it's wide open. A rookie, why couldn't a rookie come in? I know I joked about Lamar, MVP rookie, but I mean, at the same point in time, maybe they walk in and go, well, but look at the division. This isn't the NFC, this ain't the AFC North. He didn't have the, Steelers in his division to go through. So why not us?
Yeah. I'm thinking about that team with no Taylor and no Buckner. Like, they've got Bigfoot and they've got Darius Leonard or Shaquille Leonard or whatever his name is now. I think he's actually called Shaquille Leonard now.
Yeah, he did the Reek thing.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Like, everybody else is just a guy or worse. Man,
yeah.
That team would go 2-14. That team would win 2 games. That would be you want to talk about stripping it down.
Well, my thinking on that though is this: if I'm a general manager of the Colts and he's a pretty pragmatic guy, I heard him talking about, for instance, the selection with going for Richardson. I was just hearing about today, actually, oddly enough, and he was talking about how people would ask him about going out there and trading for Richardson when he is so far away and not ready to go, and it's like, well, it's just what's best for the organization. So there is a built-in pragmatism to the way that general manager operates. And obviously the owner is a bit of the wild card in there. And he's certainly one of those active owners that's like, he's cut from the Jones cloth, right? Where, he's not going to maybe go as hard as being full on general manager, but there's been some times he's come in to say some things and make his voice, heard in that. So I think that they look at it and think maybe we can capture lightning in a bottle. I think if the Buckner thing is going to be even a possibility, it's more of a trade deadline deal where they've realized they're not into it. If I was them, Brendan, you mentioned if they lose those two guys, they're at, how many wins did you have, Matt?
That feels like a 2-win team.
So it's a 2-win team. So what are they with those two guys?
4 or 5 wins.
See what I mean?
I know, but sometimes with these owners, you have to show it to them in the real world for them to believe it. They're not going to believe it until it's actually happening.
This is where I get back to the trade deadline being the place of realism point for the ownership in that organization where, okay, what are you going to do then? You're just going to sit on Buckner another year when you don't look very close at this point, or, if I'm them, I'm looking at this year, they'd be one of those handful of teams where it's, I always say, Brendan, if you're going to go into the rebuild, lean into the rebuild. Don't half serve it. Go fully into it. We fully went into it. We leaned into it. That's what they need to be doing here. Instead, they're kind of trying to, no, but if we just it's the AFC, man, like you're not getting through there. Even if you get through your own division, you ain't doing any noise, and like you said, I think you were right. 2 to 5 wins, maybe. It's what those guys provide. So if that's the upside, then be pragmatic, Mr. Just do what's best for the team in the long term. And that's giving us Buckner, not to mention they probably gets to kicking Taylor too.
Yeah. And also, for all if you wait until the trading deadline, you might find out you don't even need him. Maybe Miles Adams makes this out of nowhere leap to some super, not superstar, but star level. That stuff happens sometimes. It's not likely. But if you let the season start, maybe you have the opportunity to look at it and go, hey, we don't even need this guy.
Yeah, I think the same thing. And, we were talking about this a couple of days ago where I said, I'm of the standing now. I'll pick through the secondhand leftovers. I'll pick through, Thanksgiving's leftovers when it comes to the cut down day, and we'll see what's out there. But I've got my eye on the prize as far as I stand with rolling the dice and saying, let's see what's inside that trade deadline. Let's see if a team like the Colts that had talked themselves into stupidity to start this year, now we get to prey upon that stupidity just before the deadline. And they get even less back for Buckner than they would have gotten at the start of this offseason or than they would get right now. The price is only going down for that guy. It's not going up. And so hey, go ahead and play that game. Let us see where we're at. Let us feel, get a feel for the room. And, Brendan, most of our toughest games or the toughest part of the schedule is really the back end of the schedule. That's when you're going to need the guy for the trade deadline deal. So yeah, we'll sit back. We'll wait. And then strike at the right time. I just like that thought process for Schneider going into the season.
Yeah. I think pretty much any season, you should at least be making phone calls. Mm-hmm. Even if you're not a very good team, you should at least be on the phone calling up, all these GMs trying to see, hey, maybe he's a little tipsy. Maybe he's not really thinking straight. Maybe I can get him to agree for this trade that under normal circumstances he wouldn't, but maybe they just had a really tough loss. Something weird could be going on to where, hey, you make that phone call, you never know what's going to come of it.
You never do. And it's why I like to have the ear on the floor from our general manager versus some other teams out there that get a little more stagnant in their roster building when we get to this point onwards through where they say, we did what we did, what we got's what we got, and we're going to roll with it. Where our general manager recognizes this can be where a market opportunity presents itself, where you don't know the situation, but there can be a situation created by a team. It happens all the time where desperation sets in, or they've decided they're just out, or a player's pissed off at his situation there. And if you've got flexibility to go make a move, it takes having that flexibility and, the stones to go out there and do it at a time when a lot of teams are like, you have to have a build in the off season. You have to have them go through the mini camps. Modern NFL, I don't think you have to have that length of time of indoctrination into the team to have a guy hit and go fully. Did it take McCaffrey a long time last year to go on the hit? Did it take Kadarius Toney a long time to come in there and hit? No. Did it take Odell Beckham a couple years ago with the Rams a long time to come in there and hit? No, not anymore. Not in the modern NFL. Guys can get in there late and they can get rolling and be every bit of what you need and more.
Yeah. Looking at it, by the way, Buckner, he turned 29 this offseason, so not really that old. Had 8 sacks last year on a bad team, a really bad team. So I don't think there's any real concern about him being washed up yet or anything like that. So that's
And he's
pretty good.
he's cut from the freakish cloth. I've often said that I'm of those people that complain to being 33, 34 years old. It's those guys that oftentimes are super big, super strong freakishly or super athletic freakishly. Then when they lose that half a step, they're still really hard to deal with. It doesn't make it's not like they've suddenly now become a shell of themselves, but now they're just a little bit less than their superior dominant self of what they were in their prime. And I would have no hesitancy with Buckner with his age. You mentioned his production has been solid with the Colts as it was with the Niners. I would not think twice about making the move, nor would I think twice about signing him to a contract extension. I think he's one of the top 6 or 7 best defensive tackles in the sport, and easily so.
Yeah. And as for the specifics of the trade, I think Fant in a third that's totally fine. Like, I think that Buckner in a vacuum, what would he go for if it was just picks?
I think he's at I think he's a second, 4th round pick right now. If you're just trading for him, it's probably something in that neighborhood.
So you're saying that Fant kind of offsets by almost what would that be, like a round and a half?
I think you're offering more than Fant in a third. I think you've got
that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah, you're a second and a third in Fant for Buckner is what the cost would be.
Yeah, when you think about it, a player like Fant has no value to the Colts if they're tanking because he's a free agent, and
unless they're looking at maybe franchising him or signing him to a contract extension.
Yeah, that's really bad if they're thinking about tanking, though, right? Like that's not the kind of stuff you do when you're like for all you know, it's going to be a few years before you're even competitive again.
Well,
they might do it.
It could be too. They think this is going to help our quarterback for the rest of this year, having a tight end that can, like Fant, be at least reliable in what he provides in the passing game minimum. Some of it could be too that they're more enamored by the second and third round. That's why I say second and third round pick and Fant. They could become more enamored by those points. Fant's just kind of a look-see thing for them. And then it allows Seattle to offset the salary structure of this deal so that they could sign Buckner to a contract extension and still keep everything fitting underneath the cap for the upcoming year. So it would be more in that line, less than them like looking at Fant as, being part of the puzzle going forward.
Okay, next part of this comment, maybe call your show the Seahawks BR and end. Nobody likes puns, man. Nobody likes puns.
No.
Puns are so 1990s.
Yeah, they get the eyes rolling.
Yeah. And last comment here, I like the 4-2-5 if we had great fours too. I mean, if you're part of the reason why you might run like a 4-2-5, that's just kind of like your base nickel, right? At the end of the day, that's basically just like a basic 4-3 nickel setup. So I think it's just something you kind of run anyway, regardless of how good or bad your fours are, which I think he means defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, you've committed to the outside linebacker standing up. So whether you count them as down linemen or not, I mean, they sort of sell the same purpose of having the 4 linemen before. They're just alignments different, and how they're set up and, move by a couple of yards where they're aligned. So it all is kind of the same thing, potato. It really is kind of just the same thing. And I mean, the 4 is fine. I'm more, it's getting the secondary and creative back there and being able to, you bring out guys like Jamal Adams, Witherspoon, and Love out on the field. It becomes a little positionless with those guys. Where are they going to go? How are they going to line? What happens if you flip up Jamal up in the slot and then wait, is he going to come off the blitz? Do I got to create a hot for him coming off the blitz off the slot now because Love's back there in safety? And then what now post snap, he comes on the blitz and then you have safety, you have Love drive on the slot. And then you still have Quandre over the top to keep things clean there. You could run man to the like. There's a lot of just creative approaches to what you could do in the secondary if you just commit to we want to keep these kind of guys on the field at all times, and then let's just kind of move them around a bit. You can have the amoeba defense at times. Pre-snap, moving this guy in, moving him out, moving him up, giving these offenses no real feel for what you're doing pre-snap. And that makes offenses that puts them in a pressurized situation. And it's just one of those little advantages that we've left off the board. I harp on it, Brendan, but you left it off the table for so many years. Here's what we are. We're cover 3. Guys in off coverage. You know what we're going to play. We're just going to come at you. You know what you're going to get. We're just going to come at you. You know what you're going to get. Like there comes a point of that. You know what you're going to get. You tell me if I play you as an opponent, Brendan, in any game, I don't care if it's a video game, chess, checkers, here's what I'm going to do. You tell me that, I'm probably going to be able to have a bit of an advantage on you in how I counter you. Let's take that advantage away from offenses. And so less than it being about a 3-3-5 or 4-2-6, or the two-man fronts it's really about, to me, just get your playmakers out in the football field and then commit to being a little bit exotic in your approach. It doesn't mean you have to go heavy blitz and cover zero and all that. It doesn't mean that. Post snap, you can drop into your soft zones. Post snap, you can drop into your depth. But it does mean at pre-snap, they don't know exactly what they're going to get.
And Y2KHA, thank you for another $2 super chat. In 3-3 or 3-2, how often do you see two outside linebackers on the field? I don't really know how
No,
to.
none.
I wouldn't know.
3-3-5, you wouldn't. I mean, if you're going to run it by like the way the college runs it, they run the 3-3-5 with the edges running like the 4 technique, so you have two Red Bryants on either edge of the defensive lines, basically. And then you have the zero tech over the top. And that's how the colleges programs do a lot of their defensive stylings, because they just know offenses won't commit to running the football. So that's you're kind of, if you're going to start trying to say, well, what you're going to do then there is you're going to take Boye Mafe and have him put his hand in the dirt, and then you're going to have Uchenna Nwosu put their hand in the dirt. You don't have necessarily undersized guys, but you kind of do a little bit at that point for what you would typically do with a 3-3-5. You can do it, technically speaking, but I don't think they're going to run a lot of though it's being run in college a lot. I don't think that it's something the Seahawks, they're more liking that the two-man front with the outside linebackers on the outside. They'd more lean into that and then just pure 3-4 looks.
Yeah. It's I wouldn't expect to see a whole lot of that. But let's see here. We got one more from Scotty Mack. Thank you for the $9.99. Really enjoyed the live stream. Thanks for all the Seahawks news. Quick question. What's your go-to jersey on game day? Go Hawks.
Go Hawks. Thank you, Scotty.
What do you got for jerseys?
I don't have a lot of jerseys. So I've actually got one. I'm going to go get one of these throwbacks, I think. I'm still figuring out which one, and Hawk Shop needs to stock them up enough so I can go find one. But I have a Magic jersey. I think every Seahawks fan should have a magical jersey. This is a jersey that you only wear on days where we really need the win. You can't abuse it. It's like psychic energy that you mess with if you do. Like, you overwear it, you're pixie dust will all drain out of it. But I got a Largent jersey I go to. Draft day, all 3 days, the Largent jersey. It's helped to bring us our last 2 drafts, frankly. I would pretty much give all the credit to that. So I'll wear it probably about 3 times a year, Brendan, 3 times a year or so. But that's my go-to.
Yeah, I'm not a big jersey person either. I don't really like to wear them. I have a 12 jersey, though. I figure that one's kind of immortal, right? Like, you can never go wrong with that. Like,
nope.
There are jerseys you can get, but you don't know how it's going to turn out. You could get a Tariq Woolen, and then in 10 years, he's playing on the Rams or something.
Yeah.
Or the Richard Sherman path. You could get a K9 jersey, but he's a running back. He could be out of the league in 2 years. You could get any jersey. You never know if it's a player, but the 12 jersey is pretty much always going to come through for you.
Timeless.
So I'm pretty happy with that one. So anything else you want to say about this upcoming Cowboys matchup that we didn't already talk about? We talked about Deuce Vaughn and Mozzie Smith being the more interesting Cowboys players, but anything else on the offensive side of the ball? We talked about the defense pretty good, but anything else on the offensive side of the ball you've got your mind on?
I think it comes back to those receivers and Bobo continuing hopefully to look good, and the other guys kind of fitting in and keep an eye on what they're doing. Running game on both sides of the ball is going to be a big part of what this game's about for me. Can you run the ball a little bit better and get a little bit more of the holes created in this game? Albeit again, I know it's Forsythe, it's going to be Curhan over on the other side, but Curhan's usually at least normally been a good run blocking guy out there. So if somebody creates some holes, give these running backs a few lanes to go through, and defensively the same thing. Good to see them last week with the stop the run, but I want to see the run hemmed up, and I want to see us run the ball well. Last year, Brendan, when we went wrong, when we lost games, it seemed like you could kind of go to the same reason on each and every one of those games. And that's that we lost at the line of scrimmage. We got beat in there. And if that's a place that we can get a little stronger in this year, I think it just not only improves the team, but removes a place that opponents can attack ad nauseum if it is something that we just can't seem to stop or hem up. So, and tackling too. tackling, which was Carroll referenced. Bad at first, but got really good as the game went along last week. That's another part that's a very big key to this team's defense this year. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, my bad. I'll tell you one thing that I would be interested to see in this game, the screen game, because Greg Bell had a tweet I think it was last night, where he said, I have seen the Seahawks run more screen drills and different screen drills than I've ever seen under Carroll. And I think he actually said in every previous Carroll camp combined. Like it is a clear area of focus. And if you will remember last year, the Seahawks screen game was historically bad. The ineptitude of our screen game last year, like we thought that maybe, hey, Wilson's just not good at running the screens. You get rid of Wilson and it's just as bad. In fact, it probably gets a little bit worse. You thought it was the offensive coordinators. We cycle through these offensive coordinators. It doesn't get any better. So it's like, okay, what's it going to take here? What's it going to take for us to be able to run good screens? Sounds like it's a focus this offseason. And I was doing a little bit of research for a video I posted earlier last night, and I was looking at the capabilities of guys like Charbonnet and McIntosh and JSN in the screen game. It's real. Mm-hmm. Like JSN was actually very successful running screens his one full year at OSU. It was like he ran about 20 screens and they were all successful. And it averaged out to about a screen and a half per game to JSN that one season. So that's pretty legitimate at that point, I think. That's it's not a huge part of the offense, but it is a part of the offense that matters. So I would love to see us start to run more screens with these guys.
I would agree with you. I think it's also, let's push it forward to the opponents you play a little bit. For instance, taking the Niners. The Niners defensive line with a wide 9 is going to want to get upfield. That's what they want to do. That's what they encourage. Those guys are going to get upfield, and corners and safeties will come up and help tackle so they don't have to be as worried about the running game, and they'll tackle well so that they can be a real group gang tackling team. But think about what you do with a screen game. You do it to beat the blitz, but you also do it to attack those teams who might even come at you with the front 4 rush, who are pinning their ears back too much. They're not doing any sort of having any hesitancy to play the run. They're just getting upfield as quickly as they possibly can, looking to get their sack. And when Bosa's and the Hargraves that they've now signed, Hargrave has become a poster child for this. Go look at his run grades over the last 3 years versus what they were with the Steelers. It is miserable. It went from being a solid run defender to being a miserable run defender with the Eagles because he is trying to get upfield. And you play the Eagles and you play the Niners twice and you play the Washington football team once this year, I believe, who's got their front 4 set up as their setup. So you're going to have teams trying to get up the field at you, and to be able to call upon that screen game to be able to, hey, why don't you hit your brakes a little bit? Not so fast, Buster, like take a little beat, and that little beat, if you can make a defensive line do that, Brendan, which is what the screen game will create. Then if wait, because they hit us that screen game or 50-yarder last time to McIntosh, I got to kind of wait for a second. Okay, now I can fully go. That can be the difference between getting a pass block set or not. Then even on now snaps, you're not running the screen game.
Yeah. And I've said this before, but Charbonnet caught over the last 2 years at UCLA almost 3 passes a game. Mm-hmm. And pretty much every catch he makes is just like a check down or a dump off or a little quick screen, stuff like that. And then you have a guy like McIntosh who is running completely different kinds of plays for screens. Like he's actually lining up as a receiver and catching bubble screens. He's actually leaking out over to the left side, and then the offensive line lets everybody run past them. And it's like that misdirection play where he gets it. It's like 2 completely different skill sets for 2 running backs that are really good catching the ball. And then you have JSN as well, who I think can be good in the bubble screen area. Like the personnel is there.
And don't you think that's also been a part of why it's not been utilized recently as much, is because the person Eskridge is out for the last couple of years since you brought Waldron in, and you haven't had as much of the mobile linemen that you had to kind of bring in and get allotted. And then you didn't have the McIntosh and JSN combo on top of the Charbonnet, like you said. I think it's right on point. Chip Kelly used him all the time that way because Chip Kelly's trying to gas you on a defensive side. He wants to run as many plays as possible offensively. So he's catching your lineman thinking, you guys are gassed out. Now I hit the screen game. So he really leans into it a lot with his running backs. And I think you've got the personnel in a way now that you've never had to be able to do it. And that was one of the things I think impeded you from running it as much, at least in the last year. That wasn't always the thing that impeded you. Some of it with Brendan was that you had a 5'10" quarterback who just, as I talked about before, you got a 6'6" modern defensive lineman with his long arms up running. Back in the day, you could throw that over the top if you're 6'4" going against 6'3", but when you're 5'10" going against 6'4", you can't get that ball up over the top in the way you need to, like the lock route you talked about in the wheel route. You can't just throw the screen like Russ try to lollipop it over and everybody can rally. It's got to get into the running back's hand as fast as possible, but you're also having to get it up over the lineman's hands. So it's a little tricky if you're an undersized guy pulling that off. It's why Kyler Murray can't run that in their offense either, and he never will. And I would be surprised if Bryce Young will be able to run that stuff in their offense. So it's a part that you need to have a little bit of a taller guy, and luckily Gino's got a little bit more size to get that done.
Yeah. LJ Collier knows a little about that. Did you see the knockdown he had in the preseason game on Wilson?
No.
It was the Denver third play of the game. Wilson gets it out, and LJ is getting up, knocking it down.
LJ about to burst, about to show us it was all the scheme, Brendan. Mm-hmm. The scheme was holding him down. But that's it. Yeah. This is with the short guy thing. And Russell's been good. He had the over the top delivery, so he was able to mitigate a lot of those knockdowns through most of his career. On top of he would step back another yard or two in shotgun, and so he could get the snaps a little bit deeper to get a little bit further away from the line of scrimmage and thus remove those times he's going to get the ball knocked down. But you never could run it because of that. And I just think now you have an opportunity to do so. So hopefully they do. It's good to hear they're working on it. That's the extra part, is you got to work on it too now. You got to actually work to make it something you'd run well.
Feels like the NFL in general is moving towards offensively systems where you go down the field a few yards at a time, and the big play stuff is starting to fade a little bit. That's kind of the sense I'm getting. It's more about keeping everything safe and easy and just matriculating your way down the field. And you still have big plays, but it feels like the offenses that are built around the big play are starting to fade away.
Yeah, I think the defenses have done a good job from the Fangio schemes. It was Carroll for a while, then it was the Fangio coverage schemes on the back end to finding a way to fit and take away that deep stuff from those quarterbacks. And now you have it even to where guys like Mahomes, who was all about bomb city early on with most of what he was doing, not most, but it was a big part of his game, to now he is doing just the dink and dunk stuff and getting the ball in space. And I agree that's where it's going. And makes sense. Get the ball in your athletes' hands and let them do the work. Don't try to make it hard and them get in their route, and then your blocking holds up, and then your quarterback hits his back feet, makes the right read, point guard away, get it in their hands. And that's what the whole college system is. I mean, it's part of what sometimes to me, Brett, makes college football hard to watch, because it's just this basketball point guard thing where it's just, a little throw here, a little throw there. Nothing's really looking like football, at times, but it's where the game's going. And that's, I think, going to only get more and more on the pro level.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's kind of a Brock Purdy now, almost. Everybody's a Brock Purdy. Yeah,
kind of. That's why a lot of these guys who are undersized at the college level start to get more praise in the NFL, like more heat, because, we just get him in shotgun all the time, and then he just sits back there and just peppers the ball everywhere. It's like, well, okay, if you're going to run shotgun all the time and then just remove all your under center stuff and 3-step drops. And that's the other thing. 3-step drops are killed, right? Unless you're opening passing lanes for a 5'10", 5'11" quarterback, you can't really do 3-step drops, and then it gets a little bit tougher with that, so I don't know. It's just, I think it'll improve this year. I think it's going to take a big step forward, and it doesn't have to be dominant part of the offense, but just keeping that pass rush at bay a little bit. I think that was part of the reason the pass rush got to us through the back half of the year, is teams knew they didn't have to worry about the screen game. And so you could eliminate that in your pass rush and just get upfield. If it wasn't a run play, then it was going to be a pass play. And Seattle had so many pass plays built in that were built to hit deep, Brendan, that you go, okay, they're going to go a 7-step drop here. I got 2.5, 7. I got 3 seconds to get my pass rush off here, and get up the field fast.
Right. Yeah. But other than that, I mean, this weekend's a great opportunity for Jake Bobo to really solidify his roster spot. I think if he has another good game the way he did against the Vikings, he's good. Because Derek Young is back, by the way. Apparently it wasn't a sports hernia, which is awesome, because a sports hernia would have probably cost him a month of the season, right?
Or he might just be tough as nails. They might not have been doing the surgery after this. I've seen guys do that where they'll just be like, it's fine. I'll just, some guys are tough. They're built like that,
Yeah. And, I mean, people keep talking about Noah Fant and potential trade packages. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but people keep talking about it. I feel like for that to happen, we need to see some nice stuff from Parkinson, so we feel a little more comfortable about giving him a bigger role. So maybe he's somebody I would like to see something from over these next couple preseason games, because he's getting the reps. He's definitely getting the reps because of the because Fant is not going to be playing, and neither will Disley.
I think that's a good point. I mean, he's the guy that's got to rise to the occasion if you're gonna move off a guy that is as steady as Noah is overall. And we've all hoped that Parkinson could kind of come a little bit more forward like that, because he does offer a lot in his game, and he's stepped forward with gaining the weight he has and becoming a better blocker as he has. I think to add on to your point on that though too, let's add Mabry and Gindorf to this, because if you're going to make that, and you're going to look to, unless you're looking to go 6 wide and 2 tight ends, which as much as the team ran 3 tight ends last year, I would think that even if they move Fant, they would still look to have 3 tight ends. Yeah. So one of those 2 guys has to step forward into that spot too, for them to feel comfortable, to make that trade. But I think, I think people go to the sports track and the salary structure here, Brendan, and they look at what we can do and how things can flip either way, and what we can offer as far as assets back. And there's not a lot of way to do it. And he's the one guy you look at where there's 0 dead money. You're clearing it all off of your cap. If you do, there doesn't seem to be him with a long-term plan here, regardless of whether Parkinson steps forward or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, I understand that, you could call up Mabry for depth, but I just need something a little bit better than Disley as your number 1 tight end. That just feels like it's not enough. And then if Parkinson is just kind of a decent depth piece, it's like, now you're talking about being one of the weaker teams in the league at tight end, for a team that loved using their tight ends more than any team out there. That's not a great position to be in. But if Parkinson shows he's taking that next step, contract year for Parkinson, by the way, don't forget that for a second. Because this is year 4.
Is it? Oh my God! Is it?
The first 2 years he kept getting hurt.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, it's crept up. It's snuck up on us with that a little bit. So, yeah, I think it's a valid thing to point to, because 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns last year. That was what your tight ends produced. That's significant. That's not just I struggled across the league to find take one guy out who's not just carrying the load like a Kelsey type, that had just 3 guys all kind of pulling their weight, that you won't find anybody in that same vicinity. So, how much? I mean, the Buckner thing, though, for you, as much as that is a worry, I think at that point that, is it worth it to you then still, though, doing that trade if the Colts insisted, or you had to do it to make the money work?
Oh, yeah, I'm doing
still,
it.
Because it's doing it. But you're only willing to do it, I think, let me take it a step forward, if it's to significantly improve another space on the team. If you get that kind of real jump, then okay, I'll take my tight ends down to Averageville. And I'll make my peace with it, especially with the 3 wide receiver looks that you can go to this year now with JSN at a higher prevalence.
Yeah, I'm 100% willing to do it. I'm just aware of where it can go bad. I mean, that's kind of a summary for all of life, right? You are aware of decisions that you make can go badly, but you make those decisions anyway because it's the right thing to do, right?
That's it. And it would do your outlook on it is it would do that. It would take you down to probably outside of Parkinson truly stepping forward and showing off what reportedly had him as a 1st round gridded down by the Hawks when he was picked on draft day. That's right. You would be, I know that was when I still chuckle at. But you're going to be in that state of things. So we'll see if he is a piece or he is not, and if they would be one or they would not. But I can see where it does go 2 and 2 together. But if I'm going to move him and package him, and we're going to dial the tight end position back, then we've got to kind of, I think, round it back towards what are you getting back in return. I don't want just Grover Stewart back for Noah Fant. I want Let's make a big swing if we're going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Y2KHA, thank you for becoming a new member. I believe this is a membership on your side, Brandon, because it has the little paperclip logo on it. Oh, so okay. Welcome to Brandon's membership club, Y2K.
Let's go, Y2K. Thank you, man. Welcome aboard, brother.
Yeah, and he also did this $2 super chat right below it. Disley also injury prone. Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you trade Fant and Disley gets hurt, you are really maybe sporting the worst tight ends in the league.
Yeah, that's where I come back to Gindorf and Mabry have got to show us something on their side of it, because you're in a state at that point of, if you got to call upon those guys, you need to have somebody there that's functional. And Gindorf last week did not have a good initial view on the scene here. Mabry was a little bit better. But that's where that comes back around to, okay, how is the other guys now that step up, that slide back into the depth?
I think Gindorf got cut today, actually.
Did he? It adds up. He had a bad game, a bad
Yeah.
game. So
The guy to watch might be Hey Bear, even though he's small. Maybe he could be like Jacob Hollister, kind of like the H-back thing almost, where he's kind of a tight end.
that is Fant's spot, right? That's
Mhm.
and Fant is an H-back tight end. Technically, he can do inline stuff, but he does a lot of what he does off the ball. So if you can find a guy that fits, into that realm too, and that could work as well with it. So, yeah, the team could do some other things with this as well, Brendan. Like if you did make a trade with Fant, it's nothing to hold you back from maybe making a trade out there for an H-back type out there, maybe on another team that's available too. Especially if you're looking to just fill out the roster depth for a third guy.
Alan A, thank you for the $2. Thoughts on Christian Wilkins, defensive tackle from Miami? Yes, this is a guy who wants a new contract, and Miami may not be willing to give it.
Yeah, based on my look at him, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of him because he's out there in that AFC. So I got to admit, I haven't Allen, torn through his game film and looked at him a ton. If you're actually going to speak, if I was going to speak between how much I've watched, Lawrence, Wilkins, Jonathan Allen, and Quinton Williams, Wilkins is probably the guy that I've watched the least of the pros as all those guys. But based on what I see off of him, he is a guy that has got familiarity playing a 3-4 defense, as dominant traits that he has shown on the football field. Hard in this 3-4 type of defense to find your value as a defensive lineman. Probably why Miami's having a little bit of hesitancy in paying him, especially because I think they're just about due to probably have to make the call on paying Waddle in addition to that. And so there's some salary stuff that they're having to deal with on their end of it. Miami to me has struck me as a team that's trying to go for it this year with the Jalen Ramsey trade. It would be really weird for me that they made that. And I know Ramsey is now down to an injury, and maybe this is the ever-changing thing like we were just talking about with the Colts situation where Miami's relooking at their deal. And if I'm a team in the AFC, Brendan, I've got to put a point of sense of realism to my view of what I'm going to do in that conference. I've got to look myself in the mirror as an organization and say, what team did I really build this offseason? It's not just, it's kind of strong. It's going to be really tough. And you're not going to get by just on kind of we've got some moderate strength in here and here. And so would I do Wilkins? Yeah, I would trade for Wilkins. He's right there, I think, in that top 7 range as is Buckner is. It's Buckner, Williams, LaRon Payne, Jonathan Allen, Aaron Donald, Chris Jones. I mean, that's kind of, you got Lawrence with the Giants. It depends on who you ask, what team of what play, across the nation, who likes what, but all day, every day, if they're willing to move him, I wouldn't have any hesitancy unless there's something that they're like, he's just a party animal. And you hear that, but absent something like that, no.
Yeah. And by the way, with Wilkins, the stats aren't really there, but don't be fooled by the stats. His stats are very pedestrian. Do not be fooled. He is very, very good.
That's that thing I talk about with the 3-4 lineman thing too, is that it's really hard for fans or anybody to try to kind of evaluate these guys because so much of what they're doing is in the dirty work and the commanding the double teams, and that when they're causing havoc and wrecking a play, it's hard to always see exactly. But if you look at, for instance, his PFF grades across the board, he's 85 overall grade, 81 run defense, 72 as a pass rusher. This stuff tracks. Last 2021, 83 overall, 80 run defense, 70 as a pass rusher. So you're getting a good all-around player, scheme familiar to what you do. 3-4 defensive linemen, it's always hard. It's always hard with these guys because they do such different tasks than the 4-3 guys. 4-3 guys are easy, Brendan. It's so easy to look at a 3-tech and be like, oh, look at that 3-tech ripping it up. But it's hard to see the down there when they got to just take up men, hold the line.
But yeah, Christian Wilkins, if they're willing to trade him, I'm open to the discussion for sure.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I'd give up pretty penny. He's just going into his prime, young 25-year-old, 26-year-old kid. So you're going to be willing to pay the piper on that one.
The Snail, thank you for the $2. We need to trade Eskridge for Max Borghi. Can you trade from the NFL to the XFL?
I don't think you can. No, not well. You can trade a bag of chips in a 6-pack, but not actual monetary trades. No. So
yeah, I mean, I kind of liked Borghi coming out of college. He was like if Christian McCaffrey played with 2 broken legs all the time.
That's about right. Yeah.
Christian
McCaffrey, Yeah,
very like there's the poor man's Christian McCaffrey. Borgie's not there. He's like the homeless man's Christian McCaffrey.
Welfare. He's the
Yeah.
welfare man. He's the welfare McCaffrey.
Yeah, he was
Give
fun.
him a little bit. No, he was fun though. He was fun. And Snail loves his WSU guys.
Mark Mason, thank you for the $1.99. Over under. Bobo will have a major impact in one game.
And thank you, Snail.
Yeah, you can't set the over under at 1. It has to be 0.5 or 1.5 because that way you can't push. When you set an over under at 1 or 2 or 3 or a whole number, everybody's going to push. So I guess if you're saying, is he going to have a major impact in a game this season?
What's a major impact?
Well, that's kind of the interesting question here. I'm assuming it's something beyond catching a couple passes in garbage time when you're up by 40 or down by 40. I would say under, because you look at our receivers that are ahead of Bobo, and there are several receivers on this team that are very obviously ahead of Bobo, mostly looking at Metcalf and Lockett. Those guys have been not only really, really good, but also really, really reliable. They don't get hurt a lot. They miss very little time. And without a significant injury, it's such an uphill battle for a guy like Bobo to get on the field in a real game.
Yeah, I think Brendan captures this pretty well, Mark. You've got Derek Young back. He's a guy the team loves a lot. He's a forgotten man here right now in this receiving core because we've been kind of caught up with other guys like Bobo, Landers, JSN. We should not forget about Derek Young, though. And I think he's going to be firmly ahead of Bobo on the depth chart. And then the team's going to want to try to, it seems like they're dead set on working Eskridge back into this thing when you get back into week 6. So there's a significant depth stack up ahead of Bobo to get on the field on top of the healthy guys Brendan talked about with Tyler and DK. I think something has to go really wrong for Bobo to get out there. So I can't say he's going to have a major impact. Will he be maybe active a game or two this year? I potentially could see that happen. I could potentially see that happening, but I don't think I see him going out there and going for 80 yards in a game on 4 catches or something.
Yeah, it's just those guys at the top have been so reliable. Lockett's found a way to play football where he rarely gets hit. Like, I know Metcalf. The funny thing is Metcalf came out of college with injury concerns, and so far he's actually kept it clean. So with those two guys staying up for 16 or 17 games, it's just really hard.
It really is. I mean, they've been a picture of health, man. And, Tyler does so well about protecting himself. And one of the upshots of that you'd think would be longevity and ability to stay more available as he moves a little bit longer and deeper into his career. And DK's just turned 25. So, is he, he's not like he's at the end of his, 29, 30 years old. The wheel's about to fall off. No. So I think that there's no reason to think this year will be that year for them in that respect.
Right. So I think that's about it for this upcoming preseason game. I think we've said what we can about this Cowboys game. So there's one more thing I wanted to talk about briefly with you tonight, if you're open to it.
Yeah, let's roll.
So we are planning on doing a little series this season throughout college football where we do a show once a month talking about prospects that are of interest to us as potential future Seahawks. And we definitely want to do a show before the season actually starts. The college football season starts actually pretty soon here. It starts in late August. The first games are August 26th. So we are 9 days away. So what are you thinking in terms of a good time to do that? What do you think makes sense?
I'm good as far as any timeline goes on that. So I mean, wherever I think just before is a good idea. So next week at some point, I think we should try to kick a show off with that in regards to that and get an initial look.
Yeah. So basically, we're just going to come in with players that we recommend because there are definitely people out there who watch college football, but they don't really have a team. They watch college football because they want to get an idea of who's interesting for NFL purposes the following year. So we're going to start finding our guys. Some of them are going to be the guys that are everybody's guys because everybody loves them. Some of them are going to be sleepers, but I think it's good to start having these conversations earlier. Like last year, we didn't really talk about it at all until the end of the season. This year, if we start doing a monthly show, I think that would be very appealing to a lot of people.
Agreed. And we've done so well in recent drafts with the Seahawks. This is a big part of how we build our team. So it's important to pay attention to these type of things. And it gives us a better idea of the prospects, gives you a better idea of the prospects. And then, I often, as Brendan does, get asked about guys that there's no way Seahawks will draft. That I saw this guy play out there in the deal. There's no way for what we do and what we want and what we're looking for. We're going to look for this kind of guy. So it's also a little bit of an elimination process on those that aren't likely to be Hawks that you don't have to spend as much time, be kind of enamored by. But yeah, I think it'll be valuable to you guys and just kind of get an idea of these guys along with us as we get a clear understanding far ahead of the draft.
So you are still up for doing that?
100%.
So that's a little bit of a sneak preview for all you guys in the chat. That is coming in the coming, I guess, week now, because we're about a week away from the start of college football. 2 more super chats to sneak in here real quick. Scotty Mack, thank you for the $9.99. What are your expectations this year? Playoff team? Or are we a couple years away from Super Bowl contention, or more importantly, winning the division? Thanks again for all the great Seahawks content. Well, what do you think, Brandon?
Appreciate you there, Scotty. I've developed a pretty firm opinion on this. I think that as long as the Eagles can keep Jalen Hurts upright, I think they're going to go back to the Super Bowl this year as a rare team that lose the Super Bowl and get back to back to back. And I'll tell you, my Sidney Brown's going to be a star thing. Remember when I said that? Sidney Brown.
I remember that. Brown.
He's looking real good for them. And not to mention their injection of young talent. Nolan Smith's looking good for them. They're going to get those young guys to help that team out. I think that's going to help them really take a step forward this year in a way to where they're just going to be hard to deal with. I could be wrong with this, but I say that where I think our Seahawks end up playing them in the conference championship. I think we find the Niners not quite at full strength this year, dealing with some of the problems. I saw you did a video on it, which was smart because it's always fun to talk about dysfunction in Ninerville, Brendan. It's always nice. But they're just looking not the most fun. They're not looking maybe fully dysfunctional, but things aren't looking. What word would you use? Not semi-functional.
There are some things going on there that shouldn't be going on. Like they're giving equal reps to 4 different quarterbacks. And I watch occasional Grant Cohn videos because I have a guy who links me to them sometimes, and he basically said it feels like these quarterbacks aren't even getting like a day of reps. Like they go out and get an hour worth of reps the whole day because they have to give reps to this guy and this guy and this guy. And it's like, he feels like nobody's getting a real shot here because they're trying to give 4 people a shot. So I've seen a couple of Grant's videos too. He's getting frustrated. I've seen his other content creators getting frustrated with it. And if it's exhausting them, it's gotta be exhausting the team eventually, because this thing has been stirring around for a while. But I think that we get 12-5. I think we find our way into the conference championship, probably come up just short of the Eagles at that point. But then by next year, we're ready to roll. Guys are in just the right point, just the right time, just like 2013. Everything is just set up, kind of perfectly at that point to make that run. Yeah, I don't believe we're the best team in the NFC. So if you're talking about a Super Bowl contender, no. But if you're talking about a contender in terms of like they're going to be part of the conversation, yeah, we can be part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll definitely be in the conversation. That part will be there. So it feels just the thing I always come back to, and it's a simplistic part of this, Scotty, but that whole Super Bowl thing I just get caught up with, which eventually we're going to want to take a look at this, but where the final roster is age-wise on this, Brendan, but 26.5 years old. That was the average age of the roster. That was the youngest roster in NFL history to win a Super Bowl. This roster is going to be about 25 and a half, almost a year younger fully than that team that won a Super Bowl. A team that much younger, that had already been it had to be the youngest ever in Super Bowl history to win Super Bowl just the first time. Can they do that again? Can Carroll get them that much younger? That's a hard road to get across for me, even though they're going to be talented enough. I think they're going to be just a little bit too young to fully get to that fully butterfly state. They'll break out of the larva mold, but they won't be able to fully get the wings, fully out.
I mean, when you think about it, we've had 2 straight years of having well above average draft capital. So a big percentage of our team are rookies and sophomores. So it makes sense that they wouldn't be completely ready yet.
Yeah. I just think that'll be the reality of it, is youth does rear its head both for the good and the bad over a course of a season. We had some of the ups and downs of that last year a little bit. And you'll get some more, like you said, because you've done another draft of we added 8 or 9 more young guys that are going to be out there playing around, not necessarily all starting, but they'll be playing a lot. And you'll get the benefits of this after year 2 with all these guys having played so much so early in their career. But you do have to go through the bit of the inconsistency bumps, which if you're going to be a Super Bowl team, I think that you got to get some of that is ironed out as much as possible to really make the run, because it's so hard to make that kind of run.
The Snail, thank you for the $5. Bobo will get a big TD at least once this year while DK is on a poop cart break from that coffee gummy bear diet. Yeah, I mean, that's like the one time in DK's career he's missed time in a game, right? When he got carted off to use the facilities.
It's not DK's neck. It's only his bowels that can stop him. No corner in this league can stop DK. Only his sphincter.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe then, right? But Bobo's more of a big slot guy. So if anything, like if JSN has a game or two he misses, that might be the opportunity for Bobo, right?
It could be. They played him somewhat on the outside a decent amount in this last game. Maybe some of you were talking about things to look for in this upcoming game if they continue to do that. Because I would have thought with Bobo, if they're looking at him as just a slot guy, then put him in the slot and let him roll and see what they can get out of him in that spot, even in preseason games. To be using him on the outside and then for him to have success on the outside, because I believe the drag route, the crossing route he ran for 29 yards, I believe that was from the outside, and the deep little 9 route he ran was also from the outside. So I say this because though at UCLA he was only a slot guy, when he was at Duke, they did use him on the outside. So he has some familiarity when he played back over there of doing that with them. It's just that Chip Kelly just was like, you're slot guy only. And the speed thing is the key here, Brendan. I think that this is the great mystery here. You know, is he truly a 4.9 guy, or is he more of a 4.65-ish, 4.7 guy? Which if you are a 4.6, 4.75 guy, it's not great either, but you can kind of get by at that point, especially if you're a big, long, tall guy with ball skills, because that means you can win those contested catch situations at times to offset the lack of separation you're going to create, not having the most speed or quickness to fall back on.
Yeah, we'll have to see exactly how it pans out. I personally, I like him the most as a big slot, but we'll
I agree.
See how it pans out.
I agree. That's probably his best upside. And I don't know, we both are probably in the same place. This isn't the guy we see as a long-term probably starter in this league. You're just hoping for him to be useful if you have to call upon him on the field. And that's where he would be most useful.
Nick Craig, member for 3 months over on the Hawks Nest channel.
Yeah.
If I remember, Russ was part of the third class and they won in year 4. Correct.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. And that 2013 team basically had no rookies on it. Our top rookie that year by far was Luke Wilson with 20 catches. That was the Christian Michael, Jordan Hill, Jesse Williams, Thorold Simon class that mostly didn't do anything, but the ones who did do things didn't really do them until following years.
You were also down the first and the third that year, though, too.
Yeah, exactly. So not a lot of rookies there. So that team was very much ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's true. And you're not going to be leaning on rookies when you go through that Super Bowl year. You're certainly not going to probably have any starters on the rookie side of the ball. And if you do on either side of the ball, and if you do, it's probably only one, I would say.
Somebody just asked in the chat, has a big slot ever happened before? I think Kelvin Benjamin used to line up in the slot sometimes.
Michael Thomas.
Guy. Yeah, Michael Thomas. Yeah.
Michael Thomas.
It happens occasionally.
Most of I think of like this. I mean, every tight end that gets flexed out as a slot wide receiver is basically a big slot. Travis Kelce, when he's flexed out, that's what they are. And for all intents and purposes, Bobo is basically the same thing at the same size ratio. Does he have the physicality those guys do? No, but then he probably move quicker and better, not having the 25 extra pounds for the blocking that you have to have as those tight ends when you move them out. Yeah, he probably does have a little bit more there from a juice standpoint. So, there's been a good amount of slot guys that are the big guys. Teams have utilized that a lot in history, and not just in recent history, but you can go back and find some other ones too. If you go back even pretty far. So.
Okay, so I think we've said what needs to be said for this show. I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight on both my channel and Brandon's channel, The Hawks Nest. Brandon, I want to thank you for coming out tonight to be on the show.
My pleasure, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I will be on Twitch later tonight. We're going to lead off with a hopefully very short stream where I try to get the final Mario Kart 6400cc Gold Cup. We got to beat Rainbow Road tonight.
Get
And
'em.
then we're jumping over to Animal Crossing. So hope to see you guys there. Brandon, once again, we'll do this in the very near future. We're going to link up after this Cowboys game. We're going to link up for these NCAA prospects, and we're going to have a great year this year, aren't we?
Well, we're going to get it. It's going to be one fun season to watch of our Hawks. I think they're going to, whether they get to a point of contending or not. We saw last year, Brendan, it was an entertaining team to watch. They give you some fun games from start to finish. You got a lot of young, fun players. You got some of the old guys still going for that ring, chasing their, guys like Gino that are easy to root for. This is going to be a fun team to cover and follow and watch throughout this season.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we got to keep warming it up, right? We got to keep getting ready. We got to keep preparing ourselves.
They're in off-season mode, man. They're going to forget,
Mm-hmm.
They got to get the regular season time here.
Mm-hmm. So it has to be said. I know for some of you guys out there, you're like, you don't need to say that. And for you guys, you're right. But there are people out there, believe me.
If there's one who forgets, that's one too many.
Yeah. So needs to be said, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.